Prior to version 6, if you created a marriage event for a couple, there was no satisfactory way to record the participation of anyone but the main two people getting married. For example, if you wanted to record the bridesmaids, the best man, and the minister, there was no very satisfactory way of doing that. Now in version 6 you can properly record these people too, and that's what I'm going to look at in this video. But it's not just about weddings. You can use the same techniques that I'm going to show you to record people who have any kind of special role in any event. For example, if you want to record the beneficiaries and the executors of a will, you use the same methods. So let's start by adding a marriage event for Ian Munro and Charlotte Carrington. To do that, we go to the Facts tab of the Property box when viewing the record of either of the two people, then click Add Fact, select Marriage, and choose the spouse. I'll add the details of the marriage. Okay, so then we've added the marriage event, and this has been added not just to Ian Munro's record, but also to Charlotte Carrington's record. And it's the same information that's been added to both. And we can see that quite easily if we have the marriage event selected and we click on this Go To button. It'll show us the marriage event in the context of Charlotte Carrington's record. And you can see that the information is all the same. 12th of January 1986, Midsummer Norton and Church of St. John the Baptist. The only bit of information that we might have entered which is not the same for both is the age. Ian Munro's age, he was 33. Now if we switch to viewing the same event from Charlotte Carrington's point of view, you can see that the age field is blank. In her case, she was 28. Okay, so that's a basic marriage event that we now added. How do we add bridesmaids, best man, that sort of thing? To do that, click on this menu button and select Witnesses, and this opens the Witnesses window. The Witnesses window is a floating window, a little bit like the property box itself. It always shows you the witnesses for whichever fact or event you have selected in the Facts tab of the property box. So I'll reselect Marriage to Charlotte Carrington, and now click Add and select Add Individual. We'll look at this name only option in a moment, but for now just select Add Individual, and I'll select Nigel Munro. Who is the best man. So I need to select a role for him. There's best man. Press OK. And now to add the bridesmaids. Again, select Add Individual. There were two bridesmaids, Alice Harrison and Emma Munro, and we can add them both at the same time because they had the same role. Now notice the roles that are available will vary depending on the event type. In this particular case, the event is marriage, so these are the standard roles that are available for marriage. But you can create, if you select Create New Role Type, if a role that you want is missing, just add it. In this case, we select Bridesmaids, and that's added both of them. Now, we already had records for all three of those people. But suppose that we want to add the minister and we don't yet have a record for him. Obviously we could create a record for him, but we don't necessarily want to do that. We might just want to record his name. So if that were the case, we'd select Add Name Only, and we type in his name, which was the Reverend Ian Turnbull, and he was the minister. And we can add a note if we want. Now the last two were the witnesses to the marriage. We have records for both of them. They are Anthony Munro and Elizabeth Hodges. And the role here is witness. Now don't be confused about this. The witnesses window uses the word witness to mean anybody who is not a principal in an event. So the principals in the case of a marriage would be the couple getting married. Everybody else does not count as a principal. So the best man, the bridesmaids, the witnesses, the minister, these are all non-principal participants. And the word witness in this context means anybody who's a non-principal participant. So in that sense, all of these people are witnesses. But there's another sense of witness where it means a specific role that someone might have. So these are two different uses of the word witness. Don't confuse them. Another term that's often used is shared event. A shared event is just any event which has one or more witnesses. Okay, so we've added the witnesses for this event. There were 6 of them. Incidentally, we can also add source citations for witnesses. If we want to add a source citation for a witness, we select them in the witnesses window, and the sources for will update to indicate exactly who you're adding the citation to. So now if I add the citation, that citation is now being attached to specifically the Reverend Ian Turnbull's role. So we've now recorded 8 people who were involved in the marriage. Ian and Charlotte, but also 6 witnesses. And if we look at the record of any of these 8 people in the property box, we will be able to see the same event viewed from their perspective. So there's the marriage event in Ian Munro's record. There's the same event in Charlotte's record. But if we look at Nigel's record, select Nigel here, if you click Go To and then select Locate Event for Witness, it'll show the same event from his perspective, and he was the best man at the marriage. Or again, if we select Alice Harrison and view her record, we'll see that she's listed as the bridesmaid at that marriage. And if we run a narrative report for any of these people, the same event will be described, but from their perspective. And you can see the description that will be used in the sentence field down here in the property box, or in the case of witnesses, the witness sentence is shown for the selected person in the witnesses window. Now let's see what effect this has on narrative reports for all the various people. This is a narrative report for Ian Munro with the sentences highlighted that relate to the marriage event, and notice that there are 4 of them. This is the same event viewed in a report about Charlotte Carrington. Notice that the sentences are very similar. Here we have a report about Nigel Munro. Notice that there's only one sentence about the marriage, and again it's described from the point of view of Nigel Munro, the fact that he was the best man. And here's a very brief report about Alice Harrison, again with the mention of the fact that she was a bridesmaid at the wedding. Notice that it mentions the other bridesmaid, who was Emma Munro. And here's a report about Emma Munro, again mentioning that she was a bridesmaid at the wedding, this time along with Alice Harrison. Okay, let's take another example. This time let's say that Ian Munro's father, Anthony, made a will in 1995, and that Ian was the executor, and he and his 3 siblings were beneficiaries. So we'll add the will event by clicking Add Fact and more fact types. Select Will, click Add. The will was made in 1995 in Bristol. Now we want to add Ian Munro as executor, and to do that we open the Witnesses window, click Add, and select Add an Individual. Find Ian Munro and add him in his role as executor. The beneficiaries of the will were Ian, Judy, Nigel, and Sally. So to add those, we find Ian, Judy, Nigel, and Sally. And they all shared the same role type, which is that they were a beneficiary. So notice that we've added Ian Munro twice, once in his role as executor and once in his role as beneficiary. And that's absolutely fine to do that. In fact, it's a very good idea, because by doing so, we allow him to be listed amongst the beneficiaries as well as being listed as an executor. So if we look at the sentence in the sentence field over here, we can see that what will be added to a report about Anthony Munro is that he made a will in 1995 in Bristol, England. The executor was Ian Stephen Munro. Ian Stephen Munro, Judy Susan Munro, Nigel Munro, and Sally Teresa Munro were beneficiaries. And if we look at the same event from the point of view of one of the participants, for example, Nigel, it says he was named as a beneficiary in the will of Anthony Edward Munro in 1995 in Bristol, England, together with Ian Stephen Munro, Judy Susan Munro, and Sally Teresa Munro. Finally, here's another slightly different example of a way of using witnesses. Suppose you want to record the fact that a number of people all live together at a given time. For example, let's say that we want to record the fact that Ian Munro, Charlotte Carrington, their 3 children, and Ian's father, Anthony, all lived together in Somerset between 1990 and 1995. That's 6 people. How can we use witnesses to record that? First, create a residence event for one of the people. It doesn't matter which you pick. I'll choose Charlotte Carrington and add a residence event for her. So I click Add Fact on the Fact tab, select Residence, and we'll put in the date and the place. Then add all the people who live together, including Charlotte Carrington, as witnesses with role resident. So I open the witnesses window, click Add, and select the 6 people. That's all 6. Now give them all the same role of resident. The fact that we added Charlotte Carrington as a witness to her own event is a little unusual. If someone is a principal for an event, you don't usually add them also as a witness to that same event. But you can do that, and sometimes, as in this case, it makes sense to do so. The advantage of doing this is that by doing so, you create a list of people who all had the same role. So here we have 6 people who all live together. And when we look at a report for any of the 6 people, we will see the same event mentioned and the same list of people. So here's a narrative report for Charlotte Carrington, and I've highlighted the sentence generated for her. This is the same report, but for Ian Munro. And this is the sentence for Anthony Munro, and the sentence for Janet, and so on. We've looked at 3 slightly different ways that you can use witnesses and the witnesses window to record different kinds of information. Remember that you can add witnesses to any event or fact, and you can create your own roles for them. It is a very useful feature and a flexible one that you can adapt to your own requirements.